You'll find a list of the common cognitive distortions in the library. I'd like you to take a look at that list and apply it to yourself. Can you think of at least one automatic thought that you've had in the past that represents each of these categories? In week 1 of this course, I helped you evaluate the thought, people might be critical of me if I post on the forum. Well, I hope that I was successful in helping you evaluate this cognition and that you now post regularly. It's important not only for you to express your ideas and for other people to read your ideas, but it's also important for you to read other people's ideas as well. That's the way that you'll get the most from this course. Now I'd like to cover an important strategy we use in helping clients evaluate their thinking. We tend to use a questioning process called Socratic questioning, rather than telling clients a different way to think. In the next clinical roundtable, I discuss with our therapist the rationale for using questions instead of telling. Some therapists wonder why we tend to use Socratic questioning instead of just giving our clients a more realistic way of viewing a situation. Let's say you have a client who happens to be a mental health professional and is trying to learn CBT herself. And she has the automatic thought, I'll never be a good CBT therapist. Why not just give her some reassurance about that? Why use Socratic questioning?
Well, my first thought is to give reassurance would actually be violating the principle of collaborative empiricism, in that just telling a client something reassuring is not nearly as powerful as collaboratively looking at the concern and working on it together.
And I think with that, think of all of our clients and how many people in our lives have told them, oh, that's not realistic, or everything's going to be okay. And if that worked, then they wouldn't be seeing us. So what we have to do is help them come up with that new response, that new, more reasonable thought, and that'll help them believe it more.
It's the difference between eating for a day versus eating for a lifetime. Mm-hmm. We're teaching them skills that they can take home with them. And rather than giving it to her, we give her the tools so she can provide it for herself, and that she can use those tools herself and take them home with her.
So not only are we using Socratic questioning with her, but we're teaching her how to use Socratic questioning with herself so that she can do it when she's outside of the therapy session.
Yes.
When I was a new therapist, I had to keep the phrase in mind. I had to say to myself something like, remember, friend, ask, don't tell. Mm-hmm. And that really helped me learn the notion of working together versus giving the client what they seem to need at that moment.
I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking maybe we should advise therapists to have a little Post-it in front of them that says, ask, don't tell.
Mm-hmm. And with using Socratic questioning too, that new response, that new automatic thought that we're able to come up with is going to stick more if they come up with it themselves. And you can just think of learning in general. So if you're a therapist watching this right now, but just kind of passively hearing what we're saying, it's not going to stick as much as listening to this and asking yourself, okay, how does this apply to my clients right now? So when you're able to actively process that, which a client has to do through Socratic questioning, it's going to be a lot more likely to stick.
Yeah, it's in their own words. It's in their own language, and that makes it all the more powerful. And you make a point as far as it being in their memory. I was told we can remember 5% of what we read, about 50% of what we write, but about 80% of what we teach. And we give them a chance to teach it to themselves, to teach it to us. It'll stick into their minds all the more.
Another important point is that when we give reassurance, it could be on the basis of very little evidence. Mm-hmm. And really what we want clients to do, and for us to help them do, is to look at all of the data that's out there and draw conclusions about it, because there really could be a danger of giving false reassurance. Mm-hmm. Here's a summary of what we just covered. In a therapy session, I might use any series of questions or use another technique to help clients evaluate their automatic thoughts. You might remember in session number 1, I helped Sophia with her thought, "There's too much to learn." I'd like to review some of the questions that I asked. I won't always use all of these questions with a given automatic thought with a client, but I probably will use some variation of them. The first question is, what's the evidence? So what's the evidence that there's too much to learn? What's the evidence on the other side that perhaps there isn't? What's another way of looking at this situation? If it turns out there is too much to learn, then how could you cope with that? What could you do? But that's just the worst outcome. What's the best that could happen? And what's the most realistic outcome? What's the effect of telling yourself over and over again that there's too much to learn? What could be the effect of changing your thinking about this? What would you tell a friend who was in the same situation and had this thought? And then finally, what do you think you should do? So these are the standard kinds of Socratic questions that we ask clients when we're helping them evaluate their thoughts. Again, we might just use one of the questions, we might use variations of the questions, we might use all of the questions. It really depends on the specific situation. This list of questions is in the course manual. And now I'd like you to look at that list as you watch the video, and I use these same questions with Sophia. Sophia, could we take a look at this thought that you have that there's too much to learn? Because it sounds like that thought's making you feel really anxious, and then it's either hard to concentrate or sometimes it actually interferes with your getting started on the course for the week. So what's the evidence that there's too much to learn?
I guess, well, the evidence would just be that the course itself, there's so much new information that I'm learning about, and I want to make sure that I understand it correctly too. So it's just, there's a lot of new stuff.
There is. So there is a lot to learn. I wonder whether there's evidence, though, that there's too much to learn. Do you have to get it all perfectly the first time through this course?
Right. I guess I don't have to. That's the whole point of, learning it.
Yeah.
To not get it right necessarily the first time.
Sophia, I have to tell you that I feel as if I still learn from every client that I see. I feel like I'm a much better therapist than I was a few years ago, even. So there is a lot to learn.
Right.
But I wonder whether you could see that you could really have a lifetime of learning.
Sure, yeah, I didn't think of it like that, but...
Yeah, maybe you don't have to get everything this first time through the course.
Yeah, I mean, that's true too, because I believe I read somewhere that the course, once it's finished too, I could still have like about a month to still kind of go through the information.
That's right.
Too.
Plus, there are all the resources in the library. You could read more about it even when the course is over.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So there's a lot of ways that you can get up to speed. Okay, but what's the worst happens, and it turns out that there is too much to learn. What could you do?
What could I do? I guess I could just reread things that I've done, take notes. I guess even use the forum to ask questions for clarification.
Oh, I love that answer. Okay. Yeah. But that's only the worst that'll happen, is that you won't learn everything this time through, right?
Right.
Although there are things, as you said, to increase your learning this time through. What's the best that could possibly happen?
The best would probably be that I really study hard and am able to understand the material. I
would think maybe the best would be that you'd understand 100% of the material. What do you think is
That'd
most...
be nice.
Well, that would be nice, but maybe that's no more realistic than this idea that there's too much to learn. What do you think is in between? What do you think is the most realistic outcome of this situation?
Probably that I would understand most of the material. I would definitely struggle with some things, but I could use my resources to try to understand it better.
Right. Maybe we need to talk in a few minutes. I'm just going to make a note about your expectations for yourself.
Okay.
It sounds like you have some automatic thoughts like, I should be able to learn everything perfectly.
That sounds right.
And it sounds like that thought might be getting in your way. But just to go back for a moment, what's the effect of telling yourself over and over again that there's too much to learn?
It makes me more anxious, I think, and I feel very overwhelmed when I think that.
Right.
Yeah.
And what could be the effect of changing your thinking about this?
I'd probably be more relaxed and able to actually get the stuff done that I want to do.
You know, you told me that your friend Susan is taking this course too.
She is.
Right? So if she were having thoughts like, there's too much to learn, what advice would you give her?
I'd probably tell her to not be so worried about it and that she has done this before, so she can, I'm sure, do it again.
That's good. What do you think you should do about this?
Probably just prioritize my time and not feel so worried about it so I can focus on the stuff that I need to study.
Yeah. So maybe you could now just take a few minutes or a couple of minutes to think back about what we've just talked about and write some notes for yourself.
Sure.
All right. What thought have you had recently that you suspect was distorted? See if you can label the cognitive distortion. Then ask yourself the list of Socratic questions to help you evaluate it. Post your answers on the forum so other people can learn from you and read their responses too.